Soften your senses. Ways to become a better speaker, listener, and follower. This episode brought to you by Delmarva Veteran Builders. Learn more at delmarvaveteranbuilders.com. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC podcast. So we spend a lot of time talking about the shortage of labor in our industry, and we also talk about how wonderful of an experience it is to be in the trades and actually do things with your hands and to make a difference in the world that we live in. So we're going to take a slightly different twist on this, and we're going to spend some time with Chris Eccleston and Jenny Schroen. How are you folks today?
Hey.
Doing great.
Thanks for having us.
Oh, this is such an honor for us because it expands what we think of for education in the HVAC and refrigeration industry and just the trades in general. So we want to spend some time talking about your book, Grit Leads to Greatness. It's a children's book that is now available to the industry. And I was turned on to it by some fellow podcasters. And I stopped for a minute and went, man, we talk about this all the time, how as an entire industry, as a group of industries, the trades, we don't do a good enough job marketing what we do to hands that like to work on stuff at young ages, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I think back about our own experiences. I always tell someone, if you like working on bicycles, you're going to make a dandy HVAC technician. But it could also be, if you like working on bicycles, you could be a dandy electrician. You could be a dandy construction person. Do you like working with wood blocks? You like working with Legos? And, any person that can check that box can have a successful career doing that. And they go, wait a minute. You mean I can have a successful career tearing things apart and fixing things? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Make a mess before you make it look pretty.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about your adventure in this, because this is really a cool combination. This is not just, hey, let's spend some time talking about what we need to have in the industry. We're talking about two professionals that come from not just the contracting side, but also from the content development side. They got together and went, if we do this together, we can paint a really cool picture. So tell us how this picture started and learn a little bit more about grit and greatness.
Sure. Well, thanks. I'll go ahead and go first. I'm a general contractor. Our company's called Delmarva Veteran Builders. And for the listeners out there, that's Delaware, Maryland, Virginia. We're a peninsula about 2 hours east of Washington, D.C. We've been in business for about 10 years. We're a commercial general contractor. So we do a little bit of everything. We're a small business, have about 20 folks on the team. And a few years ago, we just kind of saw that the workforce issue was changing. It was aging. Yep. I kind of started to wake up to the realization, man, like in 5 years, this is going to be a really, really tough, hard time finding folks to just do the work. So I kind of saw it as it was going to be affecting our business, and then it was going to affect our subcontractors who probably weren't really thinking about
not preparing that far ahead.
No. And so I said, man, we got to do something about this. And I'm not really sure what it was, but we started sitting in rooms and brainstorming. And so that's kind of how we ended up with the idea of a children's book. So it's been a fun ride, and we've learned a lot, met a lot of great people. We're talking to contractors now all over the country. We've talked to some folks up in Canada and Guam, so it's starting to trickle out.
Starting to spread out a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because we're hearing the same message, that it's not just a United States issue. It's kind of seems to be international from what we've been hearing. So
yeah, so that's very true. We see the same thing.
So about 5 years ago, Jenny came to work with us, and I hired Jenny to rebrand the company, to really look at making us kind of unique and different in the marketplace, and just kind of putting ourselves out there. So Jenny.
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit. Yeah, so you heard from Chris, he's in the construction business. He's been doing this for, decade or 2 decades at this point. I've lost
We'll go
count.
with a decade.
Okay.
Right. The decade safe.
Yeah. So I always been a creative growing up. I'm a graphic designer by trade. I lived in Florida and moved all over the US over time, but I ended up moving from California. I married a widower who had 4 kids, and I moved to Salisbury, Maryland, where we are now. And I'd never heard of this place, but love conquers all, and I moved here and kind of just started a new life and just trying to get my bearings here. But it was really cool. I met Chris through friends, and they eventually invited me to come work at, we call it DVB, but Delmarva Veteran Builders. So, and like Chris said, Chris already had, he's really into marketing. He's really into, just thinking outside the box, like we'll say over and over again, probably. But, I kind of understood his ideas. I really like to look at things differently. So we started this whole rebrand thing. This kind of started in 2019 for me. As I sit here in the office and I hear a lot of our project managers, our superintendents are going in and out. And I'm always hearing about all the challenges that happen and
Sure.
just the problem solving that happens every single day. And I'm like sitting here amazed at like how things can go wrong and how we have to fix it all the time, and it's stuff that's like can be completely out of your control. You have a million moving parts, and it's like, man, this is not for the faint of heart, for
Right.
sure, but it's also, like I said, super rewarding to see the things you put all of your hard work into actually come to fruition. And they're buildings that people need and use for decades. So I thought that was really cool, and I really wanted to try to present our company in a way that's more about our people. Chris has always been, it's all about the people that work here, and obviously that's super important. So I was looking through different words, ways to describe who we are, and the word grit kept coming up. And obviously we're a veteran-based company. Chris is a Navy veteran.
Awesome.
And
Congratulations, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, thank you for your service, Chris. Obviously very proud of, I wish I were a veteran, but I really love to honor that service mindset. So we did a rebrand, and I ended up coming up with a tagline for the company. It was called Grit Leads to Greatness. And that kind of came from thinking about more of a battle cry of not just like in construction, but what can our company kind of present to the world? What can we kind of encourage people to think about as they go through life? And so we, believe grit is obviously, you can use that in your everyday life. People can use it regardless if you're in the construction industry, but it's something that makes you, it can make you great by going through the challenges and obstacles. And Chris has always been a real fan of stoicism, and he's had me read books, and I really got into it as well. And I really liked a lot of the stories were about how people look at challenges, and challenges are not something to run away from, but to like see how you can use it to better your life.
Embrace and develop yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Sure.
So we did a ad campaign. We used all of our different employees, and we made them look heroic. And we used the example of World War II, how not only military but civilians came together in the U.S. and we all worked together, men, women, children, and it was something like we were challenged against something evil force, and we were able to do something incredible, and it was really inspiring. And so I love history like Chris does as well. And so we did these really cool World War II propaganda style posters, and it became a success in our community, and people really understood what we were saying. So that was kind of the beginning of where we get to talk about the book.
The thing that I love about this is the way that you build that and you compare that, because we have to use history to be able to evaluate the future, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm a huge history fanatic myself, especially World War II. And so if we look at history in general and we see repeats of trends, we can see that when we start promoting hard work and determination and exactly that grit, and what can come out of grit, that greatness that can come out of it. We've kind of set that on the sideline for a couple of generations, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're right. There's that time period where as a nation, as a world, we do things together and we have greatness out of that. And so we had that technological development for a couple generations, and then that labor, that mechanical contribution fell to the wayside. A lot of our trade programs got removed from the schools. A lot of that ambition to do something for the world with your hands has escaped where we are. And I do believe, and I promote this on almost every show, that we are in a transitional period. I call this like the evolution of education in our industry, that we are now approaching a period where the world will have to come together to make changes. I mean, whether we are a proponent or against global warming, it's real, and it's making changes in everyone's life. How do we combat that together? How do we make a change for the world, not just for global warming, but just for advancements in technology and structure and infrastructure and development? If you don't have those mechanical skills, and if you don't have those construction skills and those building skills and electrical skills, mechanical skills and plumbing skills, we're not going to go anywhere. So as a country and as a world, it's crucial for us to reestablish who we are and what we can do with our hands. Technology is in a shift. We're all seeing things that are changing technology. AI, we're using artificial intelligence to replace people's jobs. Well, what do those people do? Well, have they ever thought about putting their hands to use and actually making a difference in the world? That's where this book comes into play.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of those principles that you put into this book and how they grow on these young children as they move into adults.
One thing that was really important to me was to make construction heroic.
Yes.
In the eyes of children. And so I think that was one thing that was really important to us. So that's why we went with magical characters that are kind of fantastical in nature and kind of superheroic. Jenny and I are both nerds, like Lord of the Rings,
right?
Comics, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of
powerful characters.
Yes. Yeah, powerful characters. So we wanted to create powerful characters because one of the things I see with the industry is kids love construction.
Yes.
It's really more of a parent and an educator issue.
Yeah.
And so, and the more I've gone down this rabbit hole with this book and learning about this issue, I really believe it's an education campaign to parents and educators. I think the reason why educators don't talk about our industry is because they don't know about it. Most of the educators in the world, or at least in the United States, they spend their adolescent youth years in education, then they go to college to learn about education, and then they go back into the school system to teach education. So they don't have, unless they have a personal connection, they don't really have any exposure to our industry.
That's exactly right.
They don't have any knowledge to speak on it.
To compare to, sure.
And so I think that's kind of one of the things. And then coupled with that, we as a construction industry or industries, we haven't done a good job of promoting ourselves. If we're not out on the front waving the flag about how awesome we are, nobody else is going to do it.
Nobody knows.
Doctors and attorneys get that kind of recognition through movies, and people see there's kind of this evidence of like, oh, he's an attorney, or she's a doctor, she makes money, and all these things that get glorified, and they don't. Those are just. Construction doesn't really get that. There's so many different aspects. It doesn't get that that recognition, and I think people try to. There's just no, I don't think necessarily everybody's against it. It just doesn't get as much of that forward front thought. So.
And so kind of going back to history, if you look at the foundation of society, these characters that everybody still knows their names today, they were artisans, they were trades folks, and they were the upper section of the society. I mean, the Ninja Turtles are named after him. So and another nerd part.
Right.
So I think that's another thing is part of these character developments is we wanted to have that kind of artisan flavor and that heritage of this means of doing something and providing value and this nobility and necessary to society and having kind of that piece of it. So I think those were kind of where we started to go and how we storyboarded this and kind of like that.
So when we were kind of trying to think of the concepts, there's typical construction books, how is something made, or
right.
just visit to a construction site, which are, kids like those books, but we, obviously our mantra is always trying to be different. So, we kind of the big thing was this whole labor shortage, this workforce crisis that we keep hearing about. We're like, what are some things that we could solve, or at least attempt to solve with a book? What can we teach the world? What can be set straight that has gone off the rails,
Sure.
and for lack of better words, but so we just started thinking about this whole heroic thing. Like, construction really is something that kids, as we wanted it to reinforce it to kids, like to remind them, so as they age and they get older and they read this book, they'll remember that construction matters and it's important. And so so that's where we took the idea of the idea came from the tagline, "Grit leads to greatness." The idea was first off was what if greatness were a place that kids could find? So that was
Right.
what set the tone.
It was
for
attainable.
Yeah. And so it's okay, well, if you were on a path to greatness, what would that look like? And so, and as we
Nice.
were thinking about that, the obstacles and about stoicism, all these different things about how obstacles actually shape your life became kind of part of the story. So we're okay, if you're going to find greatness or you're on your way to there, you're going to run into obstacles because the obstacles shape you and make you better. So, okay, what if those obstacles were traits that we obviously had kids as our protagonists, but what if these kids met obstacles along the way, which happen to be the trades, but the trades, they learn things, they don't realize it, because when you're going through a crisis or an obstacle in your own life, you don't realize how it's shaping you until you kind of look back
Reflection of it. Yeah.
reflection. Yeah.
And you recognize it. Yeah.
So the kids, being kids like anybody else, they'll run into these obstacles. They're kind of frustrated. They want to keep going. They have a goal in mind, but they meet these characters, they learn something, and it builds as they go. And then at the end, they kind of have this realization that what they learned along the way actually brought them to greatness. The journey was what made them who they were. So that was kind of the beginning of that story.
Yeah, and the context is it's in this imaginary city where the world is crumbling because people have forgotten how to build,
how to fix things.
Yeah.
So these two kids decide to go on an adventure, and then they to save the world. And at the end, the two kids, they go through a series of 5. We put 5 trades in the book: carpentry, masonry, electrical, plumbing, and welding, like steelworking. They have to build a bridge, and all of these characters are, magical, heroic, and they each have, really things from the trades that we put into the book and into each character. We met with a lot of our subcontractors when we were in character development. How can we make this, more authentic and real to the job site? So Copper, the plumber, they have this magical water slide world or whatever, and they have to end up fixing this high pressure water line that's been damaged. So the kids are working with Copper, the plumber. And she's got this huge wrench on her back, like a Braveheart sword.
Right.
So that's kind of the flavor of the characters that we did. But at the end, these kids are saving the world, and all these magical trade characters show up to help. And this is this transformation of kind of what you were talking about, of where we're at right now, a pivot point in the country or in the world, where we're going to have to come together and recognize the construction trades do add value. You can have a meaningful life. You can be involved
back to the world.
Yeah, you can serve your
provide
community.
Hope to the world.
Yes. And you can create change in your own community and serve other people and have nobility and necessary impact to your own local community. And I think that's kind of the flavor that we wanted to create with the book.
I love that. So let's pick on 2 characters. I know we have 2 primary characters and we have some sub characters. So Jenny, who is your favorite character in the book and why?
Yeah. I know that's a tough one. I feel like they're part of my life, this 2.5 years of writing it. And really it was cool to see it come to life in the illustrations. I've been picturing these in my mind,
Right.
So 2 characters. One, one I like, it's kind of personal. It's her name's Rowan. She's a gnome. A gnome is a gnome that lives in the snow. And this was a side story that my son and I kind of helped write together for one of his school projects long ago. And I'd been to Iceland and saw all these different, like, talk about fairies and elves and trolls that live there. And so it kind of inspired that
creativity
side story. But Rowan is this, this little small character, but in the book, I kind of like how she responds to, the kids are in this magical kind of winter wonderland, but there's a terrible snowstorm in the middle of the night, and the gnomes are all building. They're all master carpenters, and they're building a lodge academy. It's like a big school for the kids. And this snowstorm, they call it snowstorm of the century, comes and just destroys the construction site overnight. And in the morning, the gnomes all kind of get up, but they're upset, but they get up and they start to rebuild in the morning. Like, they all come out as a crew, and the kids stand there and they see the community coming together to rebuild. And the kids decide, they're like, well, we're tall, we can help get the heights of the structure back to where you were, because they're so small. So they could have gone on to greatness, but they realized, like, they want to stay and help the kids, and they kind of like that. They just see the community come together. So to me, that was something that I really liked. And I think with Rowan being a woman, trying to get more women involved in construction, I really like that part. And I don't believe it's just women, can solve this. I just want it to be normal that women and men work together on a job site, right? It's kind of like, it shouldn't be strange that there's a woman out there anymore. This needs to go away. And like I said, they're not going to solve it all, but we need it to be this cohesive feeling of, everybody welcoming and deciding
community.
that, like
everyone has a piece of the puzzle.
Right. And so just the contributions in that, I think that's something super important. And I like that. And I just want that welcoming environment. Like, we need that for everybody, not just women, but for anybody new into the industry. Those are things that I just think it's so strange when it's not, that there's some places that it's not like that. And it really, there's a lot of improvements and change, and I think it's going to get even better. But so you said two characters. I don't know, I feel like I went off on just one character.
No, that's great. Even just you share with your favorite one. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So that Rowan, I go with her.
And Chris, how about you?
I'm going to go with Mason the Mason. So he was the first character. Number one, he's a master mason, and he's a 8-foot tall stone ogre. And so he's got intricate carvings all over his arms that he's done. He's also a sculptor, and he's not your traditional ogre. He's very smart. He's very kind of funny, but he's also like ancient and wise, and he teaches the kids how to build a retaining wall out of masonry. They're like cutting back the mountainside so they can't continue on their path to greatness. It's blocks. He's working with the kids, and he kind of knows that this is all happening to begin with. And so I liked him so much and convinced Jenny. I had to kind of drag her along on this one, but I went to Hollywood and had Mason the Mason and Copper the Plumber actually produced. So they're live action characters. They've been in front of like 2,000 kids. And if a contractor calling, like I was calling up in like New York around Broadway and then out in Hollywood, and they're like, you want to do what now? Right. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to make these characters so they can walk around. Yeah. And so that's been, it's been a lot of fun. Mason's been probably the most, interactive character. I guess the kids have.
He's super tall, so that helps.
Yeah. And his boots are huge. So the kids.
Chris has worn the costume before. Yeah. So you should hire actors. Chris put it on, and it is a very. It gets very hot inside of that thing. And at one point, I was kind of guiding him, and Chris, I could hear like. Someone's like, I think Mason needs your help, and it's Chris inside the costume, and he's like, I'm about to pass out. I gotta get me out of here. I was like, what if he passes out in the suit in the middle of all these people? I mean, that would be so hilarious.
Super character down on the ground.
Have to like revive him,
Yeah. Well, we've taken these characters to some of these construction conferences
Yeah.
We typically get three reactions. One, this is like the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Number two, what is that? I don't even know what that is. What are you doing? But not too many, but we've had a couple of detractors. Oh, you're a circus show or something like that. But I mean, it's a way to get attention. And I knew we were onto something when we were down in Florida at a convention, and we had the actor come walking out, and these kids that weren't a part of the construction convention at all ran up.
We're gathering. Yeah.
They were running up, and they wanted to meet him and wanted to hug him and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. We got it.
Yeah.
So
nice.
Now how do we get that on scale and get them out?
Well, let's talk about that. So, Chris, Jenny, for all of those that are listening to the podcast, want to learn more about the book and wanting to find the book, where should they go?
Yeah, so we have our website, gritleadstogreatness.com. Pretty easy to find. On there, you can buy books. We have individual books for sale, and they also have classroom bundles, we call it. So you can go there to find the book. You can also find it on Amazon. Just type in the book title, and it should be there. So we're hoping to maybe go through a few different other educational avenues as well in the coming months. So, but at this point, there's two places where you can find the book.
And I got to tell you, one of the things that I'm really excited about, and was kind of probably the most shocking for us, and I think the reason why we've gotten so passionate about this, is we did a local reading event, and this was really kind of a test audience. This was in March. It was Read Across America Day or week, and we were in 5 schools and let's just call it like 60 classrooms. So we had 50 companies step up and buy these classroom bundles, and they all went into the classroom, and we went from 2nd grade to 5th grade. 3rd grade seems to be like the sweet spot.
The sweet spot, sure.
And I got to tell you, being in the construction and around the trades for a couple of decades, we're a tough crowd. We don't get super excited about a lot of stuff. But that day, watching the men and women being in the classroom, the pride for our industry on display was so moving. I have never seen anything like it. It was unbelievable. And I think coming out of that, I said, wow, we have got to get more people in our industry to see exactly what this is, because kids were interested. They were excited. The men and women, the tradesmen and women were they were beaming with pride about what they do for a living. Yeah. And they really felt like what they did mattered. And so that experience was just so moving, and we were not expecting that. We were really focused on how the kids were going to respond to it. And when we saw that, I was like, okay, man, we're game on. We got to get as many contractors in the classrooms. And so what we've done now is we've gone to trade associations and said, okay, this is what we got to do. We got to get your members in the classroom, right? And the reason why we say this is there's a couple of reasons. One, you're introducing the trades in a positive light, right? It's a heroic journey. Two, you're activating our existing workforce. We all sit here and talk about it. We've talked about it for 20 years. Well, now here's a solution. Go into the classroom and get excited, right? And feel what it feels like to have 3rd graders look up to you and look up to what you do for a living and talk about it. I mean, we had our storefront guy getting into connection details on curtain walls for over an hour and a half.
The kids loved it. They didn't want him to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I think third, so that's a legacy opportunity for our existing workforce to pass the torch.
That's exactly what it is.
And so to me, when I kind of saw that, I'm like, we have a competitive advantage. That's something that needs to be talked about. We have an opportunity to pass the torch. I mean, no other industry is facing a workforce crisis like we are. I mean, wow, to activate the 9 million plus people in the trades and get them to pass the torch and share with somebody else about what they do for the living, how what it means and how they can be involved and how it can change their lives and not just theirs and others. Like, that's a huge message that needs to get out and people need to respond to, I think. So
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what we've been doing. So we have reading events happening now in October and March, all across America. And we're talking, I don't know if I would say hundreds of contractors, but we're getting there,
right,
reading to thousands of kids. And so Jenny and I are kind of saying, okay, well, next step is we got to get a lesson plan for teachers associated with the trades. We got to get a family introductory guide to take home to mom and dad, right? Because there's people that are losing jobs now
Sure,
to
absolutely.
AI and going to, well, they can come into the trades. So this is like starting to become like a real inspirational, like active recruiting kind of campaign that we can start to build off of and build a wheel nationally.
That's why
Absolutely.
like getting the book to take home with the kids taking the book home and keeping it, that's been a really fun thing to see, because the kids feel like it's Christmas. They get their own copy, and we found out there's many kids that, different economical backgrounds, like they don't even have books in their own home. So to have a book that you get to take home with you, and it's not only talking about
It
construction,
shows that you can make a difference in the world.
right? It's talking about grit and how to like do that. So that was one thing. Like, we're not only teaching about construction, but we're also bringing an example of a character trait that you can live by. You can use grit in your everyday life. So it's kind of nice. It's kind of a nice in with schools as well, because it's not only about construction, it's also about those things. So it was kind of on purpose to kind of allow that more, not just like, oh, it's not just about that, it's about a broader idea. So teachers like that.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
All right. I love it. Well, Chris Eccleston, Jenny Schroen, we thank you so much for joining us today. And the book is Grit Leads to Greatness. And we encourage everyone to check it out. And I look forward to seeing you all, hopefully at a conference in the near future. And we can get out there and promote the book as well. So you guys have a wonderful day. And we appreciate you being on the show.
All right, thanks, Clifton.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.